You've really hurt our inner Gen X core here, David, especially
I didn't
Alexia
think you
here.
guys
I
cared.
don't really
thought,
care.
Yeah, that's your whole thing.
All right. Whoa, a little bit of Jeff Bucket to go out into the Queen's Birthday weekend. Wonderful. Alexia Russell, David Cormack, thank you very much for being with me. And that's us. Thanks to Amelia for producing the show.
Te whakarunga mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, the road's going nowhere after the government downgrades some of its upgrades. Saddle up though, a bike bridge is coming. Some Pike River families plan to sue the government over its decision to seal off the mine. 4 people are killed after a van and truck collide ahead of the official start to the long weekend. Tokyo rushes to finish spectator stands for the Olympics, but who's going to fill them? The pint-sized recycle whiz who knows his 1s and 2s from his 3s and 7s, plastics that is. And here comes the bride. Yup, we've solved the wedding photo mystery. So who are they and where are they? All the deets coming up.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata with DNA. A cycling advocate says building an entire bridge from the ground up is unnecessary and cyclists and walkers could just have a lane on the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge. The government's confirmed a new separate bridge just for bikers and pedestrians next to the current bridge at a cost of $780 million as part of its infrastructure package. Bevan Woodward, a cycling campaigner who's clashed with the transport agency before, says they didn't even trial, even just a week, an obvious alternative.
And that is to take the westernmost lane for walking cycling, do it initially as a trial to see if it works. We know it's worked many times, many places overseas. Let's try it out, and if it works, then that should be the solution.
The government also says it's still planning on a third harbour crossing, a tunnel for public transport. Ashburton's mayor says today's deadly crash is a sad end to the week for the region as it rounds out a week of devastating floods. 4 people travelling in a van from the North Island are dead after a van and truck collided near the Ashburton River this morning. Another 2 people are in hospital, one with critical injuries and one with serious injuries. Ashburton Mayor Neil Brown says it's a tragic end to a tough week.
Devastated, really, having a multiple tragedy like that in our district on top of what we've been just going through. It's just people just don't need that sort of thing at the moment. So, but in saying that, we feel for the families that are involved.
Neil Brown says drivers should allow for extra travel time as traffic swells with holiday makers heading away for the long weekend. Traffic is building on several North Island roads as motorists head away for the long Queen's Birthday weekend. In Auckland, traffic is heavy on the southern motorway and north of the city around Warkworth and Wellsford. It's slow going on State Highways 29 and 2 heading into Tauranga, and in the Wellington region it's busy on State Highway 1 between Plimmerton and Pukerua Bay. Traffic is flowing well in most South Island regions. Dilworth School has apologised to any former pupils abused in its care after police laid more charges in relation to historical sexual offending today. 2 more men have been arrested and another 2 who were already before the court are facing additional charges. Our reporter Finlay Dunseith has more.
Detective Senior Sergeant Jeff Baber of the Auckland Police says a 73-year-old man has been charged with 3 counts of indecent assault and a 39-year-old man has been charged with 3 counts of sexual violation. That brings the total number of alleged perpetrators to 11, of whom 3 are now dead. Meanwhile, a 61-year-old is facing a further charge of indecent assault, while a 73-year-old faces a further 5 charges of indecent assault. A spokesperson for Dilworth School Trust Board says none of those arrested are currently connected to the school, but the school regrets and apologises to any victims. All 4 men are due to appear in the Auckland District Court on Tuesday.
The lawyer for a New Zealand resident fighting extradition to China on a murder charge is taking the case to the UN Human Rights Tribunal after a split judgment by the Supreme Court today. Kaeung Yup Kim is accused of killing a woman in Shanghai in 2009. The Supreme Court has adjourned the case, saying the government needs to seek further assurances from China that Mr Kim will get a fair trial and not face torture. His lawyer, Tony Ellis, says both the Chinese Communist Party and its Chief Justice reject the concept of judicial independence. A highly anticipated US intelligence report into unidentified aerial phenomena will reportedly say there is no evidence they are alien spacecraft, but it will also say the sightings remain unexplained. The New York Times, quoting briefings to Congress members ahead of the report's release later this month, says the vast majority of 120 sightings did not stem from any American military or other advanced US government technology. The newspaper says there was concern that China or Russia could be experimenting with hypersonic technology. It's coming up to 4.5 minutes past 5. Canoe racing star Lisa Carrington says the mental rather than physical challenges will be the biggest obstacle for her at the Tokyo Olympics. The two-time gold medalist will contest 4 different events. Carrington is confident she's physically up to it, but admits the pressure of doing it at an Olympics adds to that challenge.
Incredibly scary, the what if I don't win, what if I lose, and I think it's really the acceptance of both that will help me in that moment. So it's a big challenge, but I don't work this hard, just to turn up and hope it's all going to be fine.
Tokyo will be Carrington's 3rd Olympic Games. The New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko has fallen off the pace after the opening round of the US Open in San Francisco. Ko was 3 under par through the front 9 holes, just 1 shot from the lead. A horror back 9 holes saw her finish in a tie for 16th, 4 shots behind the leaders. Black Caps batsman Devon Conway has reserved special praise for tail ender Neil Wagner, who are for helping him become just the 7th player to score a double century on Test debut. Conway scored 200 runs exactly on day 2 of the first Test against England at Lords as New Zealand posted 378. The debutant was on 186 when Wagner, the Black Caps' number 11, came to the crease. Conway says he couldn't have brought up the milestone without Wagner. England will resume tonight at 111 for 2 in reply. That's the news.
This Sunday morning, dogs. The smart breeds, the new breeds, why we choose their names, all in Simon Garfield's new book. Joanna Grahovich on Ernest Shackleton. Astronomer Seth Shostak on the big US report about to be released into UFOs. If you can't exercise, will hot baths do the trick? In some important respects, it seems yes. We'll discuss that research. And Professor Roy Baumeister has unusual advice about how to improve self-control, lose bad habits and gain good ones. Sunday morning starts at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells with isolated showers tonight. Cloud and showers increasing tomorrow. Waikato to Manawatu, including central high country but excluding Taranaki. Fine spells, areas of persistent fog or low cloud today and tomorrow morning. Taranaki and Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, cloudy periods and a few showers, mainly Kapiti Coast tonight and Taranaki tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, also Kaikoura Coast and Canterbury. Generally fine but a few showers about northern Gisborne tomorrow. For the remainder of Marlborough, also Nelson and Buller. Fine tonight, showers tomorrow, turning to rain later in the day, possibly heavy. Westland and Fiordland showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow. Heavy falls and strong northerly winds. Otago and Southland, high cloud, rain for a time tomorrow afternoon or evening. And Chatham Islands, fine weather. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7.5 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, Susana. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The government's pulled a major U-turn on transport projects it promised more than a year ago, saying it wants to cut carbon emissions and potential price hikes too. 6 of the 32 multi-billion-dollar projects won't go ahead as planned after an estimated cost increase of $6 billion across all of them. Among the downgrades to the promised New Zealand upgrades, the 22-kilometre kilometre 4-lane spruce-up to State Highway 1 in Northland is gone, and South Auckland's Mill Road project is effectively scrapped. Instead, Northport gets a new rail link and South Auckland gets rail upgrades, more train stations connected to public transport, walking and cycleways. But as our political reporter Annika Smith reports, it's a move neither end of the political spectrum is happy with.
COVID-19 has interfered with plans the world over, and the country's biggest infrastructure projects are no exception. The New Zealand Upgrade Programme's transport package was always going to have a big bill, but Minister for Infrastructure Grant Robertson says it close to doubled in the pandemic.
Fully funding the new estimated costs for every New Zealand upgrade project would have cost up to $6 billion extra on top of the original $6.8 billion. So we have taken a balanced approach with a mix of additional investment and a handful of projects being rescoped.
More than 2/3 of the projects are going ahead as planned, but 6 have been axed. Among them, the controversial Mill Road Highway. Since the pandemic, it's tripled in cost, rising to $3.5 billion, making it the most expensive road in the country. National Party leader Judith Collins says binning a route so essential to the southern Auckland community is ridiculous.
Mill Road is now almost a gridlock car park. There's no safety measures that need to go there. It just needs a new road, and it needs to be able to take the volume of traffic that is necessary for people.
Part of the reasoning for dropping Mill Road was climate emissions modelling that showed the highway would emit 5 tonnes of carbon every day by the 2040s. Minister for Transport, Michael Wood, says the reset has given the government a chance to better align the projects with New Zealand's climate commitments.
If we keep doing things as we have done them in the past, we'll get the same results. As it stands, transport contributes 47% of New Zealand's CO2 emissions, and emissions from transport have risen by 90% over the last 30 years. So there is a need for us to rethink the kind of projects that we are delivering.
The Green Party's transport spokesperson, Julianne Genter, says this rethink lacks ambition.
We really don't have that much time left. The massive priority right now needs to be a step change in investment in regional passenger rail, public transport, walking and cycling. All of that's going to make a much bigger difference to our communities than a few expensive fringe motorways that ultimately will exacerbate urban sprawl.
National's Judith Collins says far from being a shift to more climate-friendly projects, the changes are just an excuse for government incompetence.
Michael Wood is now starting to make Phil Twyford look useful as a minister, and that is a shocking indictment on him and on his government.
The government stands by the changes it's made to the infrastructure program. Grant Robertson says history shows large construction projects in New Zealand and overseas always grapple with cost inflation, and the pandemic has made it that much harder.
Transport Minister Michael Wood explains how the government's commitment to cutting emissions prompted a rethink.
What is new this year in terms of the climate perspective is that the Climate Change Commission has now delivered to us its indicative report, which tells us about the significant changes we'll need to make in the transport sector. And it is only appropriate and responsible that we consider that advice as we're making these big investments. So that's been a part of the rebalancing. You look
but
at a
Minister,
big
that report, with the greatest of respect, tells you what you already knew. So why weren't you brave enough to do this last year?
Oh, well, look, I'm a new minister coming into this role from the end of last year.
You're in a government.
Deal with this. But look, it is a new situation to have an independent climate commission very clear with us about the kind of changes that we're going to need to make across our transport system. And their draft advice, they've now been very clear that we are going to need to think about these kinds of investments, and that transport has one of the most significant roles to play in terms of New Zealand meeting net zero by 2050. So we have to take that on board. When we get new advice, the responsible thing is to consider it. And I think the rebalancing that we've achieved helps New Zealand to get on that path.
So are you saying that the Labour-led government was utterly unaware of the environmental consequences of the roading projects it signed up to last year?
Oh, not at all. And in the program that was agreed to last year, there was a mix of roading projects and rail projects and walking and cycling projects. And very specifically, one of the objectives of the New Zealand Upgrade Program at that time was to have a balance of those investments. But we've now got even stronger evidence on the table of our need to look at things differently, and that's contributed to the rebalancing today.
So out south, right, they're expecting huge growth there, lots of houses, massive housing developments, and Mill Road, you're basically canning that project as it was. So how do you know that you're not pumping $1.4 billion into a project which will basically be obsolete before you get started, i.e. that the capacity out there, the traffic capacity, is going to be way beyond what you're creating?
What's very important there is that we are retaining the same levels of investment into supporting housing growth, improving safety outcomes, and trying to do so in a carbon-friendly way. So the same amount of investment that was committed for that South Auckland growth area is going into that area as a part of this package.
I understand you're investing the same amount of money, but you're putting it into different things. So in terms of vehicles, what are the projections there for the next 3 decades when it's expected, 120,000 extra people are going to be living in that area?
Well, that's right, and that's why we have a huge amount of investment going in there. So in this broader package, there's investment going into electrifying the train line between Papakura and Pukekohe, so those people are part of the Auckland commuter network. There's investment in a third main line. There's investment in improving capacity on State Highway 1 that I launched a couple of months ago. Now, through today's announcements, we are able to confirm that there'll be 3 new rail stations, so that in those growth areas, we're directly linking those new communities into the public transport network from the get-go. And with the additional investment today that we've announced as well, we'll be providing great walking and cycling routes and public transport routes to connect those homes and those businesses with the public transport network, with the train stations. This is going to improve not just our carbon emissions, but it's actually going to take pressure off the roading network.
Okay, so what forecasts do you have? Give me a number for the number of vehicles that forecasting shows you will come off the road as a result of what you are doing in Drury Mill Road.
Well, look, the numbers for that aren't there at the moment because in many cases...
You said you were doing your homework up front, Minister, so that's the information you need to make decisions, isn't it?
And I'll answer, Lisa, if you'll give me a moment. And the answer to that is in the case of Drury in the growth zone of the south of Auckland, many of the developers are still working out and finalising their plans as to exactly how they will develop those areas. What we do know is that there will be significant growth there, and this investment will support that growth far better than just pouring more cars onto the southern motorway and congesting the network more than it's congested at the moment. Let's be really clear about this. This country has declared a climate emergency. The opposition even stood up in Parliament and declared it and voted for the Climate Change Response Act. We cannot carry on doing the same things that we did before that and expecting different outcomes. So I'm actually really proud of the fact that we have said in this package that we are going to rebalance and we're going to think about transport investment that doesn't continue to contribute to climate change and doesn't continue to contribute to congestion.
If we're facing an emergency, this is tinkering around the edges, isn't it? When will you bring back plans for a fee-bait scheme and put a date out to ban imports of petrol cars?
Well, we have a significant process underway at the moment to respond to the recommendations of the Climate Change Commission. I put out a document, He Kinu Te Kohupara, from the Ministry of Transport, which is canvassing all of the options for how we will make that transition. It includes the policies that you've just spoken about, and very soon I will have more to say about the government's plan in terms of a clean car incentive. To be very clear, if we're going to make this transition and decarbonise transport, which is one of the biggest things we can do to meet our climate change objectives, we are going to have a range of changes, and we're starting to make those changes today. The upgrade package that I've announced today is about that shift. Other policies in here, like, for example, getting the rail spur up to Port Marsden. That's about making sure that we can move our freight round in a more climate-friendly way and getting the big rigs off the road, making it better for everyone else.
The Clean Car Policy, Minister, when can we expect an announcement?
I'll have announcements to make in the coming weeks on that.
Weeks? Couple of weeks?
Later this month.
Okay, just quickly before you go, the bridge, the new bridge for bikes alone, there's been plenty of false starts and pretty pictures before. Will you stake your job on getting this finished in 5 years and on budget?
Look, I don't contemplate failure. I am totally committed to getting this done. It's a missing link for Aucklanders in terms of the walking and cycling link. This is the 21st century, and Aucklanders do deserve to be able to walk or cycle across their own harbour. So I'm absolutely committed to getting it done. And it's part of a broader package about how we improve access across the harbour, including our ongoing work to get a public transport-centred connection onto the North Shore. So I'm very committed to it, and I'm certain it'll happen.
And you're happy to stake your job on that?
Look, I think there are very high expectations on the delivery of this, and I'm absolutely committed to making it happen.
And that was Transport Minister Michael Wood. Homai o whakaaro, do send us your feedback. Interested in your thoughts on that. What kind of incentive do you think there should be to move to e-vehicles or cleaner vehicles? And what about a ban on petrol imports? Let us know your thoughts. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpointrnz, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And speaking of traffic, a bit of an update. Up north, a section of State Highway 16 in Wellsford is closed between Davies Road and State Highway 1. Now, that's because of a crash. Waka Kotahi says traffic is heavy on key routes across Auckland, and the agency is reminding people to take regular breaks and to stay alert on the roads tonight. It is 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And still to come on the program, the mammoth wait list for detox beds in Auckland. 4 people are dead after a truck and van collided near the Ashburton River flood zone this morning. 2 others are also injured, one critically and one seriously. The pair are recovering in Christchurch Hospital. Police say a moment's inattention led to the deadly crash and have a warning ahead of the holiday weekend. Our reporter Alicia Foon and cameraman Nate McKinnon have this story from Ashburton.
A tragic start to the long weekend. 4 people have died in a crash near Ashburton. Police were called to the scene on Cochrane's Road and Waikanui Road in Elgin at 9:30 this morning after a truck and van collided. It's a rural area not far from the township. Area Commander Inspector David Gaskin says there were at least 6 adults in the van in total who were visiting from the North Island.
There are 4 people that have died. 3 died at the scene and 1 has subsequently died at the Ashburton Hospital. 2 other people in the van are injured. 1 is critical and the other is in a serious condition. And the driver of the truck, who's the only occupant of the truck, has got moderate injuries. Any fatality has a hardship on the community. Ashburton and the Mid-Canterbury area has suffered a number of these type of accidents. And all I can really stress is that people are very, very careful on the roads. It's up to all of us to do our bit and hopefully we'll all get home.
It's believed at this stage that a van went through a controlled intersection where it crashed with a truck in a lapse of concentration. After dealing with a week of flooding and roading issues due to the damaged Ashburton Bridge, the town's Mayor Neil Brown says it's a sad end to a difficult week.
Very devastated, really. Having multiple tragedy like that in our district, it's on top of what we've been just going through. It's just that people just don't need that sort of thing at the moment. So, but in saying that, we feel for the families that are involved, and it's difficult.
The Mayor and police are warning drivers to take care on the roads this weekend and to expect delays coming through Ashburton.
A mammoth wait list is blocking patients struggling with substance abuse from accessing a bed at Auckland Metro's main public inpatient detox unit. Instead, those who fall ill waiting for a bed at Point Chevalier's Pittman House are advised to go to already overloaded emergency departments. Meanwhile, Checkpoint has learnt some staff are concerned about the medical detox unit's move into central Auckland. Nick Trubridge has the story.
Just remember, I love our people and they deserve better.
Meet via Michelle Kidd of Te Rangamarie Charitable Trust. For decades, she's walked the halls and entered the cells at Auckland District Court, supporting the vulnerable, addicted and homeless as they navigate the justice system. Via Michelle says when it comes to public inpatient medical detox services, the country's biggest city is severely lacking.
To have a 7-week wait for anybody suffering from an illness is what I call sinful.
That's exactly the situation at Auckland's main medically managed inpatient withdrawal unit at Pittman House in Point Chevalier, which can offer up to 11 beds. But Fire Michelle says anyone in desperate need of a bed should be able to get one.
It's absolutely terrifying to feel like you're an outcast of our society, and then on top of that to be refused or told, oh, no, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait another 7 weeks because we actually don't have the beds.
So what about those who become acutely unwell while sitting on that nearly 2-month wait list for one of those 11 beds? Checkpoint understands those people are advised to go to an emergency department instead, which some of Waitemata DHB's own doctors say are already overwhelmed by people presenting with alcohol and other drug-related harm.
They should not be going to a hospital that does not have facilities for somebody to detox safely. That's wrong. And don't tell me that there are other facilities for detoxification other than a police cell. There are none. Please, if you find them for me, please could you give me a ring?
Lieutenant Colonel Lynette Hudson oversees social services at the Salvation Army. She says the gap in time between getting someone a detox bed simply heaps more pressure on emergency rooms.
And surely the better thing would be to get more resource going into the detox, to catch people when they're motivated to change and when they need that level of support.
A spokesman for Waitemata DHB, which operates community alcohol and drug services for Auckland Metro, says despite the 7-week wait list with some provisions for emergency admissions, just 7% of patients required the level of care offered at Pitman House. He says the emergency department is the right place for those who fall ill while in the queue for Pitman House. His comments have been voiced.
Presenting to a hospital emergency department is an appropriate initial option for people whose medical needs may emerge abruptly, but it is by no means the only service available to support people with severe substance use disorder.
The DHB's also dismissing focus on Pitman House as misleading,
as it does not acknowledge the range of services available for those who do not require inpatient treatment. The opportunity also exists for patients who are very sick to be treated through the city's main hospitals when required.
But there's more trouble at Pitman House. Checkpoint understands some staff are concerned about imminent plans to move the inpatient medical detox unit to the City Mission's new homeground building. Fire Michelle agrees with them and believes the move presents further problems for unwell members of the public seeking inpatient detox services.
Centralising these things is wrong, particularly in a place like Auckland Central. Frankly, we have enough of our problems here, and our people would be better served if they were out of the city, in some sort of fresh air without tar air. Proper caring houses outside of this Hobson Street.
The DHB says management and the board made the decision to move the unit to central Auckland.
The move to Mission Homeground allows the CAD's medically managed withdrawal inpatient service to integrate with complementary social detoxification services operated by Auckland City Mission. This will result in an increase in access to managed withdrawal through the combined use of both services. It is inaccurate to suggest the relocation will result in a reduced service to patients.
Despite being able to run 11 beds at Pitman House, the DHB says it's funded to provide 10 beds, and this number will remain available at the City Mission. It says staff who have toured the new Central Auckland location have given favourable feedback and are looking forward to working at the mission.
A group representing some Pike River families is suing the government over its decision to seal off the mine. The families say they weren't told of the move, instead hearing about it in the media. The legal review comes with a warning from the 22 Pike River families. Don't expect us to stop looking for answers. Ben Strang has more.
Pike River family's spokesperson Bernie Monk says he's no longer angry at the government.
Oh, it's beyond that. I mean, let's face it, I've been through over 16 CEOs and chairmen of boards. I've been through over 16 people in the police. I'm on my 3rd Commissioner of Police. I'm on my 16th government minister from both parties, and now I'm on I've had 4 Prime Ministers counting Winston Peters, and now I'm on my 3rd government. Well, what are they doing to us?
Bernie Monk and more than half a dozen family members of those killed in the Pike River mine disaster attended the Wellington High Court today to file a judicial review of the decision made by Minister Andrew Little to reject a plan to continue further into the mine. Instead, the mine will be permanently sealed. The family's group committee lawyer, Paddy Brand, says the review challenges those decisions.
This judicial review is another step in the journey for the Pike River families. They've fought for nearly 11 years now for justice, accountability and truth. Over the years, the families have been promised a lot. The review seeks to establish whether the promises made by Mr Little and the current government have in fact been met.
Bernie Monk says those promises haven't been met and the families have been treated poorly. He says communication from the government over its decision-making has been poor and the families weren't informed when the decision was made to not venture further into the mine.
Listen, we only found out in the media that they were actually going to seal the mine up. It was crushing. You know, where was the transparency? It's never been there.
Carol Rose, the secretary of the family's group committee, says they're too close to give up.
They've travelled 2.3 kilometres down the drift. They've got between 50 and 130 metres to go to get to the main fan, which is all the investigation points to that being the source of the explosion, the ignition point. So that's got to be the most critical forensic site within the mine. Why would you stop when you are less than 130 metres away?
The government says progressing any further would be too costly, but Paddy Brand says the families have an alternate plan that the government haven't considered.
The families commissioned their own experts and they have a plan which is feasibly safe, and technically doable and is significantly less cost than what the government purport the costs to be. And so the review is going to be looking at all of the information that we have on the table and whether or not the decision to ultimately seal the mine is lawful.
Mr Brand says the review is an urgent application with work to seal the mine supposed to start this month.
Victoria has uncovered a new COVID-19 variant not connected to any other cases from the current outbreak. The Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, says it's the Delta variant, which originated in India. The cases involve members of a family who travelled from Victoria for a camping holiday in Jervis Bay, which is on the southeast coast of New South Wales. Professor Sutton has called the Delta variant one of significant concern.
The fact that it's a variant that is different to all of our other cases means that it is not related in terms of transmission with these cases. It has not been linked to any sequence cases across Australia from hotel quarantine or anywhere else. So it has not been linked in Victoria or any other jurisdictions. Now, we know this family travelled to Jervis Bay. And we are examining who is the likely index case in this family and therefore trying to trace back where this variant has been picked up. We're working with our New South Wales, ACT and Commonwealth counterparts in that regard, given that Jervis Bay Territory has a combination of responsibilities across those jurisdictions.
The family visited several places in Jervis Bay, including a campground inside a national park, a supermarket, an antiques shop and cafes. There are 350 locations of interest linked to the latest outbreak in Melbourne, which is in its second week of lockdown. Te iwi e haere nei e our checkpoint. The negatives that have turned into a positive. We've got a development in our hunt for a mystery bride and groom and rediscovered photos. We'll have all the details coming up. And the 4-year-old who's fantastic at sorting plastic. He could teach us a few things. Homai Ofakaro, would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let me know what you think of the dedicated bridge for bikes. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines with Susanna.
Ashburton's Mayor Neil Brown says the death of 4 people in a road smash is a sad end to the week for the flood-hit region. 4 people travelling from the North Island are dead after their van and a truck collided near the Ashburton River this morning. Another 2 people are in hospital, one with critical injuries and one with serious injuries. A cycling advocate says building an entire bridge from the ground up is unnecessary, and cyclists and walkers could just have a lane on the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge. The government's confirmed a new separate bridge just for bikes and pedestrians next to the current bridge. Meanwhile, the Transport Minister Michael Wood has told Checkpoint an announcement on an electric vehicle rebate scheme will be made in the next couple of weeks. Auckland's Dilworth School is apologising and expressing regret to any victims after more charges of historical sexual offending. Police have laid fresh charges against 4 men, 2 of whom were already facing charges. A spokesperson for Dilworth School Trust Board says none of those arrested are currently connected to the school. Traffic is building up on several North Island routes for the long Queen's Birthday weekend. In Auckland, traffic is heavy on the southern motorway and north of the city. A section of State Highway 16 in Wellsford is closed between Davies Road and State Highway 1 because of a crash. It's slow going on State Highways 29 and 2 heading into Tauranga. And in the Wellington region, it's busy on State Highway 1 between Plymerton and Pukerua Bay. National MP Nick Smith will return to Parliament before he leaves the job after 3 decades. On Monday, he announced his retirement after being told details of an inquiry into a verbal altercation at his Wellington office had been leaked to the media. Nick Smith has confirmed to RNZ he will be at Parliament on his last day to give his valedictory speech. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And Nicholas Poynton is here to talk business. Nicholas, I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but overseas buyers coming in and snapping up good firms. So another local tech company's
another one's been snapped up. It's the 4th firm this year to be snapped up by an overseas buyer for a fee that's believed to be over $100 million. This time it's the cloud computing vet company called EasyVet. Probably wondering what on earth it is they do, but I'll get to that in a second. It's been sold to a US-based and NASDAQ-listed company called IDEX Laboratories. That's for an undisclosed sum, but it is rumoured to be over $100 million because it does need approval from the Overseas Investment Office. So EasyVet's products include providing vets and customers with an online tool to really store clinical records, manage calendars, calculate quotes, and provide sort of summaries to complex clinical information. Essentially, the problem that this company is trying to do is to free up time for vets so they're spending less time on admin, all the admin that's involved with their jobs, and more time on animals. And this company is yet another example of a firm that in its early stages received sort of government funding through one of the state funding agencies, in this case Callaghan Innovation, but it's then been sold offshore. And I got to speak to a rep from Callaghan Innovation today about this. He says the sale is great news. He says the company now has a parent company that has very deep pockets. It's going to help it accelerate growth, take it to new markets, and the important thing for them, they say, is that it's going to lead to the creation of high-paying jobs here in New Zealand. But often one of the criticisms of these sales to offshore buyers is that we can see the profits being taken overseas. When I put that to Callaghan Innovation, their response was, well, when a firm is bought by an overseas buyer, it can lead to what they call the multiplier effect, which is when, in this case, you have the CEO of the company, who is often the founder. When they sell the company, they essentially sell it for hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not just going to sit on that money and do nothing with it. Often is the case that they'll go out and find other things to put that money into, maybe start up new ventures in the future. So, as is the case with all the sales we've seen this year, it'll be very interesting to see whether these founders actually go out and do that. I'm not saying that they don't do that, but it'll be interesting to see where they look to redirect some of the proceeds of some of the big sales. They also said that if this company is moved overseas, the research and development program, that's what Callaghan Innovation provides the funding for. If it does relocate, well, then there's actually a clause for Callaghan Innovation to actually recoup the money that it provided for investment. So there is an opportunity for some of that money to come back.
Interesting. Now, Treasury was warning around the time of the budget that there was going to be, a sharp turnaround in the housing market and people being, getting another warning bell.
Yeah, I think Treasury and the Reserve Bank talked about potential sideways house price growth. Well, the BNZ Bank has come out with an economic note today, and they're warning of a possible sharp correction to the housing market, and they're basing that on two things really. The first thing they point to is weaker population growth. That's coupled with the drop in investor demand, maybe a nod to some of the suite of policy measures unveiled by the government earlier this year, and also home ownership now being viewed by many New Zealanders as largely out of reach. They say that's likely to come, all these factors are going to come together and put real downward pressure on demand. And the other point they refer to is a piece of data that came out from Stats NZ earlier this week, which shows that residential building consents in the year to April are up 15% on a year ago to about 43,000. But obviously,
so more stock is what they're saying.
There's more
bring
stock,
the price
but
down.
obviously you can't live in a building consent. So, but the value of work put in place, this is another thing that Stats NZ measures when they look at the housing market. That rose by 3.7% in the March quarter to $6.7 billion, which is the highest quarterly rise in 2 years. So that anticipated fall in demand matched with the increase in supply, that does raise the risk of a correction. But the BNZ Bank has stressed that they're not forecasting a correction, they're just talking about the possibility. But even if there was a correction, let's say 20%, it would take prices back to where they were a year ago. And I'm sure in the eyes of many people who feel locked out of the housing market, that's not necessarily music to their ears.
Let's take a canter around the markets.
The NZX is up 0.5%, or about 63 points, to 12,496. The dollar is at 71.5 US cents and 93.3 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with Business. Last night, we asked if you knew the identity of our mystery bride and groom. Well, I do. The stunning young couple was snapped on their wedding day by the photographer Ian Hulse. The dresses, hair, styling, all pointing to the 60s and probably in Wellington. Ian has since died, but his son Richard discovered the negatives in his father's archive and wanted to return them to the couple. Well, guess what?
Hello, Lisa. I'm Janice Street.
Who are you, Janice? Like, who are you to us?
Well, I'm the mystery lady who you put out a search for through some very old wedding photographs taken in 1967 from a really loved photographer called Ian Hulse.
Can you tell us about that moment in time? So you're the bride, you're our mystery bride. When was it?
Yes.
What year? Where were you?
Well, it was the 4th of February 1967. I was 20 years old. The photographs were taken in the Botanical Gardens in Wellington. It was a beautiful day. And Ian took such beautiful photographs. He did a wonderful job. And Ken, who I married, he was a year older than me. He was 21. It was a lovely wedding. And yes, we were very happy with the photographs.
How did you meet?
Well, we were childhood sweethearts from college days. I first met Ken when he was a paper boy in Kandala. And we went to the same college, Onslow College. We were foundation pupils of Onslow College because it was a brand new college in those days. And we played hockey together and we just became sweethearts. And everyone knew we were always going to get married. And of course we did.
The photos are stunning. The dress is beautiful. Have you still got it?
It's right beside me. I designed it, but I didn't make it. It was a sleeveless wedding dress and had bows on the shoulders, as you can see, and the train sort of went out behind, and the dress itself was just a slim dress in the middle.
Absolutely stunning. Very Jackie O-ish. Where did you get your inspiration from?
Yes. I got it from a magazine picture, which was, in the 60s, they were showing different things, and I saw a picture of a sleeveless wedding dress, and I thought, oh, that looks really good. And so I sketched it out and gave it to the dressmaker, and I have to say, she did a really good job.
So on the negatives of the photos, it had the words Bar Carlisle. Are either of you Bar or Carlisle, or is that a complete red herring?
It's a complete red herring. I would suspect that the photos got misfiled because it should have been MacArthur Wood instead of the other names.
I'm holding my breath here, so forgive me for being so forward, but, well, are you still married to Ken?
No, Ken and I divorced, unfortunately. We had a son together, a son called Travis, but we divorced some years later because I suppose it's the way of things when you are childhood sweethearts. As you mature and grow older, you sort of tend to go your different ways, and that did happen to us. But we still keep in touch regularly. We're still the best of friends, and he's happy in a new life, and I've been too.
So where in the world is Ken these days?
He's in the Gold Coast in Australia.
And how long were you married for?
10 years.
So these photos from your wedding, did you get any photos at the time?
I ordered some, yes, because Ian, took the photographs and then let us have a look at them and gave us one folder full of photographs taken at the reception, black and white photographs, and then a little folder full of the coloured photographs. And of course, we could order a bigger one from those photographs. I have got a big black and white one here.
So do you think these are the extras?
Well, these were what we were given at the time. I believe that's how Ian did it. It was part of the cost of the photography that he gave you the folders, and then you had the choice of ordering more formal ones, which would be framed, of course.
The negatives that we have seen, do you think those are the extra photos that maybe he didn't show you, the ones that were kind of, the seconds?
It's very possible, Lisa. I believe I've got most of them, but in actual fact, when I was looking on the stuff, there was one there I didn't recognise, so it is likely that there could be, yes, 2 or 3 photographs I have never seen.
You mentioned the day and how you guys were happy. It was a wonderful day. You were in the gardens. Do you remember posing for the photos? And because they are very of the time.
Yes, I remember it very clearly.
What has become of your bridesmaids as well?
Well, the interesting thing, Lisa, was the bridesmaids were in different colours. You might see from the photographs, one was blue and one was pink, which was a little unusual. The lady in blue, she's my younger sister, Adrian. She lives in Australia. And the lady in pink was a maid of honour who was the wife of a mutual friend.
When you got the call from your daughter-in-law, did you just kind of think, what did you think?
Well, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I was incredibly moved, actually, to see them. I just thought, why me? Why? Suddenly it's all over on the computer. No, I was, as the call said, you are not going to believe this. And I didn't.
Hey, that dress, your wedding dress, looks like it's in absolute pristine condition there. Where's it been for the last, 50 years?
Well, to be quite honest, Lisa, and this is the embarrassing thing, I thought it was a bit tarnished, but apart from a little bit of discoloration on the lace, it's pretty good. There was confetti down the front of it, so I carefully pulled all the confetti out. But it really has stood the test of time well. I just had it in a plastic bag.
What, up in the wardrobe?
So, yeah, pretty much. It was inside another zip-up bag, but it was just in a plastic bag. There was no tissue or anything. Just gobsmacked. It's looking so good.
And looking at it sitting there beside you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I reckon you'd still fit that beautifully.
So I'd have to get someone to zip me up, that's anything.
Hey, can you show me the photo that you do have? Is it there with you? Hold it up underneath your chin so we can see. Let's get a comparison. Oh, it's as if you were, still 21.
Oh, Lizzie, you flatter me.
When you saw the photo of you and Ken together this morning, what did you think?
My first thought was, oh my goodness, that looks so beautiful. That's what I first thought. I mean, if I'd seen any other couple, I would have thought, wow, doesn't that look great? I was quite bowled over.
Is it as you remembered it?
Yes, absolutely.
You guys are still mates, so what do you think he's going to be thinking when he sees all of this?
I think quite honestly, Lisa, I think he'll feel quite a lump in his throat, which is pretty well what I did too.
And that was Janice Street, the bride, and she's 75 years young last month. It is 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And Moriaki in Pitapita Kōrero after the news at 6. A dedicated bike bridge over Waitemata Harbour. Worth it or way too much? Well, I can tell you now, heaps of you are already getting in touch on that subject. On Twitter, Mark says the new bridge is fab, but cyclists have been promised solutions for many years. For them to always disappear into the ether, climate change is becoming an increasing crisis. Cycling is a quick and easy solution, and a dedicated lane on the bridge can be implemented quickly. Peter's got an idea. Peter says, would a bus with a trailer for cycles take cyclists and pedestrians across the harbour bridge? A small charge could make this almost cover the cost. It could start from near the bridge and there'd be no delay in starting. Yeah, I kind of think that sort of busts up your journey though, doesn't it? If you want to be pedal power, you want to be pedal power all the way, maybe. Ron has an idea too. How about a pedal-powered ferry and the cyclists are the power source? They could propel themselves across the harbour. And someone else on the subject of putting a pedestrian and cycle lane actually in one of the lanes on the harbour bridge, wondering how safe could cyclists and pedestrians be crossing when cars and trucks rock and flip in high winds. Do keep your feedback coming. 2101 on text, and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The case of a Korean-born New Zealander who's been fighting extradition to China on a murder charge for a decade is set to head to the United Nations Human Rights Tribunal. After 15 months of deliberation, the Supreme Court has today indicated the government can surrender Kim to the Chinese authorities if it gets more detailed assurances he will get a fair trial and not face torture. Ruth Hill reports.
Kyung-Yup Kim, who's lived in New Zealand since he was 14, is accused of murdering 20-year-old sex worker Pei-Yun Shen while on holiday in Shanghai in 2009. Two previous justice ministers have approved China's request for his surrender, but those orders have been stymied by judicial reviews. The Court of Appeal quashed the government's decision to send him, but then Justice Minister Andrew Little appealed that in the country's highest court. Today, the Supreme Court has issued a majority decision, with 3 judges in favour and 2 against, to adjourn the appeal to await more information. Justice Susan Glazebrook said clearer assurances were needed that Mr Kim would get a fair trial in Shanghai and that he would not be tortured.
The court reiterated that a trial is either fair or it is not, and a somewhat fair trial would not suffice. It also noted that it did not accept that there should be a balancing of the right to a fair trial and the public interest in extradition. There can be no public interest in extradition to an unfair trial.
Justice Glazebrook said all 5 judges agreed it is possible to accept diplomatic assurances someone will not face torture, even when they come from a state with a poor human rights record.
It is possible for a minister considering extradition to accept assurances in relation to a person at high risk of torture and a state where torture is systemic, provided the assurances are sufficiently comprehensive, there is adequate monitoring, and there is a sufficient basis for concluding that the assurances will be complied with.
Mr Kim's lawyers had argued that in light of the human rights situation in China, no reasonable minister could ever make the decision to extradite him, but that's been dismissed. His lawyer, Tony Ellis, is disappointed at both the further delay and also at the court's apparent conclusion that Mr Kim can be safely extradited.
What assurance is of any value from a government that presides over a system that is one of the worst mass murderers and torturers in human history?
Dr. Ellis notes Sweden, Poland and the Czech Republic have all refused to extradite people to China in the last decade.
I'm really quite surprised that in a country as liberal as New Zealand in terms of human rights would come up with a decision such as this, albeit it's not final yet.
He will be filing further information to meet the Supreme Court's deadline of the 30th of July, but is also making plans to appeal to the United Nations Human Rights Tribunal.
And normally you've got to exhaust your domestic remedies before you can go to UN committee, but if they're futile, you don't have to, and we consider that 10 years, that was enough.
Dr. Ellis says Mr Kim, who spent 8 years on remand in New Zealand prisons, is in poor physical and mental health.
Another traffic update now. A crash is causing delays on State Highway 1 in Auckland after Borden Road in the Albany area. It's clear of the lanes now, but Waka Kotahi is urging people to pass with care, that is the scene of the crash, and to expect delays until it can be fully cleared. Canoe racing star Lisa Carrington will have a crack at more history at the Tokyo Olympics. The two-time gold medalist has been confirmed to contest not one, not two, but 4 different events at the upcoming Games in Japan. As Clay Wilson reports, it isn't a case of why, but rather why not, for the 10-time world champion paddler.
Lisa Carrington, gold medal!
Lisa Carrington has lined up and knocked down many challenges during a career lined with success. And although contesting 4 different classes at the world's biggest sports event dwarfs them all, the offer was simply too good to decline.
I guess you kind of figured, if I can do it, why not try? No one's done it. It's a big ask, but why not take that opportunity? Not play it too safe, and I think that's what's exciting. It's about just putting myself out there and doing the best I can.
Carrington won't tackle the challenge alone. The 3-time Olympic medalist will be joined by Caitlin Regal in the K2, before they team up with Alicia Hoskin and Tennille Hatton to complete the Games regatta in the K4. Regal says the quartet are 100% committed to maximising their chances of success.
The way in which we are going to rally around each other to make this work for every single boat is going to be pretty cool to watch. So what we thought was possible 2 years ago, we've gone beyond that now. So I know 4 events or 3 events is a lot, but it's definitely doable in this group of girls.
In Carrington's case, the juggling act she faces is not unprecedented. The 31-year-old has contested all 4 events at 2 different World Championships, medaling in all 4 on each occasion.
First time it was really scary because most events I'd done was 2, and I thought that was tough. But in saying that, it really came down to following the plan, just making sure that followed that plan, did things well, recovered well, that type of thing.
Still, Carrington knows doing it on the biggest stage of all is a different story, as does coach Gordon Walker.
She can do it physically, but then the Olympics is just a different beast. And if you win a medal, you don't know how you're going to feel. Suddenly you get taken on this roller coaster you didn't plan on going on, so it's the ability to probably deal with those emotions. So it's a tight schedule, but what we can't predict entirely is exactly how people will feel.
Also unknown is exactly what an Olympics will be like in a country still battling the impact of a global pandemic. Walker says the bubble-to-bubble type environment will present a significant extra challenge.
Our mission is to get them to the start line. If we can get them to the start line and they're paddling like they were paddling this morning, then we'll be okay.
Carrington, meanwhile, is confident that will happen, even if many in Japan continue to call for the Games to be postponed for a second time.
The NZOC and the IOC are doing their best to keep us safe and keep, the Japanese people safe as well. And I guess, we've got a lot of faith in them that, they'll give us the right protocols and that type of thing to do that.
It means Carrington's focus can be entirely on the task she has been set in Tokyo, a task tailor-made for a 2-time Olympic champion.
We didn't dream it up overnight. It's something I've been preparing for the last 4 years, and a lot of time to figure out if I can do it. And each World Champs or each year goes by, it's like, okay, yeah, this thing is becoming more real. And I guess the idea is I don't want to limit myself.
Having become the first Kiwi woman to win multiple medals at one Olympics in Rio, Lisa Carrington is ready to rewrite the history books once again.
4-year-old Frankie could teach a lot of growing up something about recycling. This Petone preschooler is totally sorted when it comes to knowing which bits of waste go in which bin. Reporter Ruth Hill and visual journalist Dom Thomas did some rubbish reconnaissance with Frankie and his mum.
That one glass, that one general waste, that one recycling, that one general waste.
It's no exaggeration to say that Frankie, who turns 5 in July, is obsessed with rubbish, in a good way. Proud mother Anne Barkos says Frankie's fascination with recycling started when he was barely 2.
Yeah, he suddenly was so interested in all things rubbish and recycling, and it's just got stronger and stronger and stronger, and he's starting to get really interested in sustainability, that the oceans, what goes into the oceans, all sorts of things. So it's pretty cool, actually, and it's not showing any signs of going away.
Tell me, Frankie, what can you recycle?
Cardboard and paper and some plastic.
Which plastics can you recycle?
Ones with number 4 of it, Happy Valley and and one's with number 1 and 2 and the recycling truck.
At home, he keeps 6 plastic wheelie bins in the lounge to sort the family's recycling out properly. On Tuesdays, he and his auntie do the rounds of the neighbourhood's recycling bins to check no one is trying to sneak in the wrong kind of plastic or some other crime against the environment. Then after they've been emptied, he puts the recycling bins back for the neighbours and others he has come to know.
He does that and people are really, really grateful and they really enjoy seeing you come around and even when...
And the card on this one said that these can usually be recycled, but they have to go with that one.
The lids do, don't they? The lids go in there. And the rest of it can go in there, doesn't it?
Wow, you really know the details. Frankie's daycare has also embraced his passion for sustainability.
Every now and then he lectures people if they get it wrong, including his teachers and the managers and things. So, but it's all taken in good, in the right way, and everyone just really enjoys it.
Even on weekends, Frankie does not relax his vigilance. He and his dad often make a special trip to the dump at Happy Valley in Wellington to recycle some plastics not accepted by Hutt City Council at present.
So why do you care so much about recycling, Frankie?
Because it saves the planet.
Frankie is excited Hutt City Council is rolling out its new waste collection and curbside recycling service next month. It includes 7 new electric recycling trucks, dubbed Bin Diesel, Truck Norris, Recyclosaurus Rex, Bruce Spring Clean, Trash Gordon, Chitty Chitty Bin Bin and Trucky McTruckface after a popular vote. The switch to one citywide provider, the Multinational Waste Management Limited, has been controversial, with many residents rallying to support locally owned operators who missed out. However, the council's chief executive, Joe Miller, says the overarching aim is to reduce waste and provide a safe, cost-effective way to provide services that customers want and can use appropriately.
Now, that is a superhero without a cape, Frankie. If you were listening to that, do go online and Ruth and Dom's piece will be there so you can check it out on Facebook. You can get a few pointers there. If you're not quite sure what goes where, Frankie will tell you. We're getting a lot of feedback on the bridge, this bicycle bridge. Alan says, I've been a cyclist for 30 years, but the government has lost the plot with its plans for $2/3 billion. Do it and you have lost my vote, says Alan. Debbie says we will still need roads by their calculations. We'll be driving electric cars anyway, so carbon emissions are negligible. So why not build Mill Road and the Southern Motorway extensions as planned for the electric cars? 29-year-old from Auckland says Michael Wood is speaking a lot of good sense, and I think the government is taking a pragmatic approach. Roads won't change anything, they say.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. An announcement on a clean car incentive will be made later this month. The fee-bait scheme is designed to make electric vehicles cheaper to run than petrol cars, but was scuppered by Labour's former coalition partner New Zealand First last year. The Transport Minister Michael Wood told Checkpoint he is confident the government's latest infrastructure package announced today will make a difference to traffic issues.
I'm actually really proud of the fact that we have said in this package that we are going to rebalance and we're going to think about transport investment that doesn't continue to contribute to climate change and doesn't continue to contribute to congestion.
Today's changes to the government's upgrade program axes the controversial South Auckland Mill Road highway and promises a new bridge over the Waitemata harbour for cycling and walking. A group representing 22 families of Pike River victims has filed an urgent legal challenge in the High Court against the government's plan to permanently seal the mine. They say they were never consulted on the decision by the minister responsible for Pike River re-entry, Andrew Little. He said going further into the mine would be too difficult and expensive. A family spokesperson, Bernie Monk, says communication from the government has been poor.
Listen, we only found out in the media that they were actually going to seal the mine up. It was crushing. You know, where was the transparency? It's never been there.
Bernie Monk says the application for a judicial review today sends a clear message to the government that they still need answers. Work to seal the mine is supposed to start this month. Motorists are being warned to drive safely ahead of the long weekend following a crash involving multiple fatalities near Ashburton. 4 people died and others are recovering at Christchurch Hospital. Alicia Foon was there.
Police were called to the scene on Cochrane's Road and Wakanui Road in Elgin at 9:30 this morning after a truck and van collided. 3 people were killed at the scene. 1 died on the way to hospital. 1 is in critical condition and another is in serious condition. The driver of the truck had minor injuries. Area Commander Inspector David Gaskin says there were at least 6 adults in the van and they were visiting from the North Island. Ashburton's Mayor Neil Brown says it's a tragic end to a week which saw devastating floods in the district.
A 34-year-old Auckland woman has been sentenced to more than 2 years in prison on child abuse charges in what a detective describes as the worst injuries he has ever seen inflicted on a child. The woman was charged after her 2-month-old baby girl was admitted to Starship Hospital in Auckland with critical injuries in November 2018. Detective Inspector Bridget Dole says the injuries on the defenceless baby were horrific and she suffered broken bones throughout her body. He says what makes it even more appalling is the fact that the child's injuries were inflicted by her own mother, the person who had a duty to care and protect her. Mr. Dole says the girl is now 2 years old and is still recovering from her injuries. Victoria State authorities have detected the highly infectious Delta COVID-19 virus variant for the first time in the latest outbreak in Melbourne. The variant likely caused the devastating outbreak in India. Victoria State Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton says the new variant is not linked to any sequenced COVID-19 infections across Australia.
We will look at all other sequences, re-sequence to the fullest extent possible across Australia to see if there are any potential linkages to known cases. That includes those who've come through formal quarantine, but also anyone else, maritime, airline, diplomatic.
The new variant was found in a family who visited New South Wales last month. Government ministers say they are stunned by the state of Māori boarding schools. Ministers Calvin Davis and Meka Whaitiri took a tour of Hukarere Girls College near Napier today. They both say the state of the classrooms is sad and need improvement. As part of this year's budget, the government has promised $20 million to help the 4 remaining Māori boarding schools around the Motu. The other 3 schools are Te Aute College and St Joseph's Māori Girls College, both in Hawke's Bay, and Hatopaora College in Fielding. The schools don't know how much they'll get yet, but it will be divided on a needs-by-needs basis through Te Puni Kōkiri. National MP Nick Smith says he will return to Parliament before he leaves the job after 3 decades. On Monday, he announced his retirement after being told details of an inquiry into a verbal altercation at his Wellington office had been leaked to the media. Nick Smith has confirmed to RNZ he will be at Parliament on his last day to give his valedictory speech. It's 5 minutes past 6. Breaking the partnership of Joe Root and Rory Burns will be key if the Black Caps are to grab the advantage on day 3 of the opening cricket test at Lord's. England will resume tonight on 111 for 2 in reply to New Zealand's first innings of 378, with Root on 42 and Burns on 59. New Zealand lost their last 7 wickets for 90 runs to lose some of the gains they'd made on the first day. Bowler Tim Southey, who has 1 wicket, says the pitch is far from easy for the batsman.
We saw with our batters, it's not that easy to go out and start. That'll be in the minds of the guys coming in, also us as bowlers, knowing that if we can keep chipping away at wickets, it's not an easy wicket to start on.
The match resumes at 10 o'clock. The Blues are treating tonight's Super Rugby Trans-Tasman match against the Reds as if it's a final. They are top of the table after 3 rounds, but coach Leon McDonald says they're aware the short nature of the competition means defeat in Brisbane could end their finals hopes.
If you don't win it, you're out, aren't you, really? So, we're playing it like it's a final. We expect a tough game. Suncorp's always hard for every team that plays there, other than the Crusaders a couple of weeks ago. But I played there myself, and it's a brutal place to play, so we're expecting that.
Kick-offs at 9:45 after the Crusaders face the Western Force in Christchurch. New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko has fallen off the pace after the opening round of the US Open in San Francisco. Ko was 3 under par through the front 9 holes, just 1 shot from the lead, but her play on the back 9 holes saw her finish in a tie for 16th. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, spin-off website founder Duncan Grieve selects the mixtape. Country Life assesses the impact of the Canterbury floods, as well as visiting the farm where old plumbing goes to die. then gets born again. Fetus Productions is just one of the Friday Night Live acts, and because we are marking the birthday of one this weekend, we've got a Sonic Tonic dedicated to Queens. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells and isolated showers tonight. Cloud and showers increasing tomorrow. Waikato to Manawatu, including central high country but excluding Taranaki. Fine spells. Areas of persistent fog or low cloud tonight and tomorrow morning. Taranaki and Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, cloudy periods and a few showers, mainly about Kapiti Coast tonight. Taranaki tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, also Kaikoura Coast and Canterbury, generally fine, a few showers about northern Gisborne tomorrow. For the remainder of Marlborough, also Nelson and Buller, fine tonight, showers tomorrow, turning to rain later in the day, possibly heavy. Westland and Fiordland showers, turning to rain for a time tomorrow, heavy falls and strong northerly winds. Otago and Southland high cloud, rain for a time tomorrow afternoon or evening. And Chatham Islands fine weather. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Plans to build a $700 million bike bridge have been deemed totally unnecessary when a lane of the existing Auckland Harbour Bridge could be used instead. That's the response of one cycling advocate to the government's announcement of an extra harbour crossing for cyclists and walkers. But a trucking leader says the priorities are backwards and vehicles need to zip across the harbour, not a few cyclists. Jordan Bond reports.
Bevan Woodward, a tireless cycling campaigner who's clashed with the Transport Agency, is wondering why the government's just committed to spending close to $1 billion without even trying an obvious alternative.
That is to take the westernmost lane for walking cycling, do it initially as a trial to see if it works. We know it's worked many times, many places overseas. Let's try it out, and if it works, then that should be the solution.
Transport Minister Michael Wood admitted today the bridge itself was not a choke point. Bevan says that admission and overseas experience shows taking a lane away wouldn't grind the city to a halt.
There's been many cases, including in the States, where they've taken a lane of a bridge, given it to walking cycling, and predictions of traffic Armageddon have not eventuated at all. In fact, the opposite happened. When people think there's going to be a problem with traffic, then they change their plans.
The government expects about 5,000 people to use the new bridge a day, compared to at least 180,000 people using the existing bridge. The whole plan, a bit pointless, says National leader Judith Collins.
How many people are seriously going to be taking their kids to school, the netball team to sports, across a cycleway? Is this really realistic? Fact is, it's not.
Road Transport Forum Chief Executive Nick Leggett is in favour of more cycling investment. He says it just shouldn't be prioritised over a vehicle crossing.
Let's get a new Auckland Harbour Bridge where we can get buses and trucks prioritised and use the existing bridge for cycling and walking.
He reckons this is a vanity project.
It's really an ideological capture to spend $700 million, which will have to be paid for by all New Zealanders, on something that will be used by so few people and will add very little to the Auckland transport network.
After nearly 20 years of campaigning for something similar, many cyclists are overjoyed. Cyclist and urban designer Emma McInnes says the bridge will be used for people's morning commutes, but also for recreation.
I think we're underestimating the fact that people will use it just for the joy of being able to walk over the water, to stop in the middle of the bridge, take photos, to go over on a jog in the morning, walk over your dog, take your kids cycling down there. So I think people are really underestimating just how popular a bridge like that would be.
Others are on the fence.
I don't think it's a good idea because it's not practical. Because on a windy day or rainy day, the harbour bridge might be closed for cars, so let alone for like pedestrian or cyclist.
I think it's great. It's a great start to get more people cycling, really, because just across the bridge there is really accessible, but the only way you can go is in a vehicle at the moment.
I don't think would be enough cyclists to justify the $765 million that it's going to cost to build it.
Long-time Bike Auckland campaigner Barbara Cuthbert remains a little jaded from the government's lack of delivery after they announced a walking and cycling path in 2019.
They've done this before. They've been down this track. They produced some lovely graphics and a big price tag of what they were going to do for walking and cycling. 2 years later, when they'd actually done a little bit of design work, they said, no, we can't do it.
It wasn't just one harbour crossing committed to today. Michael Wood also said work's continuing on another crossing, this one likely a tunnel under the Waitemata Harbour, which will include public transport.
Wow, this has really got you guys going, both for and again. This listener says ridiculous building a walking cycling bridge. Add the dollars into a train tunnel and pedestrians and cyclists use that to get over or under the bridge. See, I find that really hard to get my head around because isn't the whole purpose of having cycling and walking so you can do exactly that, walk or cycle, not actually have to load yourself onto a train. Grant says don't forget about EVs and hybrids. They need roads too. Frank says, what do I think of a dedicated harbour crossing for pedestrians and cyclists? Firstly, it's a good idea. A dedicated bridge means people not breathing in car exhaust fumes as they cycle or walk across. Secondly, the media will always find someone to complain about a solution. Just do it, says Frank. Another listener reckons 30% of Northcote electorate works in the city. If they could cycle or e-bike over the bridge and avoid parking charges in the city, it would massively reduce traffic on the bridge and the infamous Oniwa Road, Northcote queue, meaning the loss of a lane to cars on the bridge won't matter. Now, this one's kind of, well, this person's been thinking a lot about this. Remove the expensive to maintain clip-ons, repurpose the original bridge to accommodate cyclists and pedestrians, and build a new second crossing, which should be a beautiful, iconic bridge and not a tunnel, which would cost $1 billion more than the tunnel being considered. The brakes have once again been slammed on plans for a 4-lane highway near Whangarei, and local leaders are furious. The road between Whangarei and Marsden Point has been a regional transport priority for more than 10 years. But an upgrade has today been substituted for a new rail line out to the port. Kiwi Rail and Northport say it will be a game changer for the area, but many Northlanders aren't impressed. Nita Blake-Person filed this report.
Stunned and disappointed, I guess, would be the two emotions that first came to mind this morning. It was like my jaw dropped.
Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai is still processing the news that a desperately needed roading upgrade in her rohi has been shelved. Plans to turn the deadly stretch between Whangarei and the Marsden Point roundabout into a 4-lane highway have been on and off for years. But Cheryl Mai says this latest U-turn is a bolt from the blue, especially after Transport Minister Michael Wood was asked about it during a meeting just last week.
The question was directed specifically to him about the 4-laning project, and while the response said the funding is still there, I think we could probably say we thought that meant the funding for the project was still there, but the funding for investment into infrastructure projects in Whangarei was still there, but not the road.
Instead, the money will now go towards a rail spur out to Marsden Point, a huge boost for plans to expand Northport and improve freight transport. Cheryl Mai says that's fantastic, but it can't come at the cost of the road upgrade.
They are doing some investment into safety improvements, and that is welcome, but it just feels like the significant investment that's required to infrastructure in Northland yet again has been sidelined by other projects. The people in Northland like the idea of being able to cycle across the Auckland Harbour Bridge, but that's probably not our priority.
She's not the only one unimpressed. National's Shane Reti, the former MP for Whangarei, says it's unbelievable.
I mean, we have to imagine every strategic plan, every economic strategic plan for Northland, probably over the past decade, has said the number one economic driver for Northland is the 4 lanes.
As for the rail spur, he's pleased there's been a boost to the use of Northland's port, but isn't convinced it's worth the money.
Show me the business case that no government's had for the past 20 years, because no government has been prepared, be it Labour or National, been prepared to build the Marsden Spur because no one would use it. And I'm pleased if the recent cargo movements might have encouraged that, then show us the business case.
Murray Reid of Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Pawa is the chief executive of Northland Inc., which promotes economic development in Te Tai Tokoro. He's been crunching the numbers too.
And when you consider Northland's productivity is, I think it's about minus 0.2%. Generally speaking, to improve productivity, you need investment. And in this case, the indications were that we were going to get some investment in our roading system. and that's not going to happen.
He says looking south, it's easy to see what difference those roads can make to a region.
Northland is pretty resilient, but this has been a bit of a body blow. I mean, if you take a look at the investment that's gone into roading, say between Auckland and Hamilton or Kirikiriroa and Tauranga, even the bypass Puki Expressway, there's been some great roading investment down there, and you can see the benefits of having good roads. You don't necessarily need more roads, you just need some good roads. Whereas up north, you get to Warkworth, and it's challenging.
But there was some celebration today. Kiwi Rail Chief Executive Greg Miller says the rail upgrades will be a game changer, and Northport is also welcoming the news as it says it has a role to play in developing resilient supply chain alternatives. Whangarei MP Emily Henderson says Whangarei will still get the same level of investment, but the rail focus will help with economic recovery and reduce hefty road traffic emissions.
It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Nationals leader Judith Collins is pulling no punches in her public condemnation of former party candidate Jake Bezant, describing the allegations against him as one of the most disgraceful things she's ever seen in politics. The way the party selects its candidates is under scrutiny after allegations the party's former Upper Harbour candidate posted naked pictures of an ex-girlfriend and impersonated her online. Speaking to media today, Judith Collins says she was unaware of the allegations until Tuesday.
I'm not going to go down the lines of who said what, where and how, but to say that I had no idea about what he was actually doing and what sort of clearly fantasist, possibly sociopath he is, would be right. I didn't know about him.
Ms Collins still has confidence in Party President Peter Goodfellow. Instead, she blames the selection process for Mr Bezant slipping through the cracks.
I think that's very clear from our review that we did. When I found out on Tuesday evening about what Jake Bezant had been up to, I thought that was one of the most disgraceful things that I've ever seen in politics, and I'm just so pleased he's not an MP.
But then this man was used by the National Party at its mainland conference to give an address, and was used as recently as last Sunday by the party. So is the party blind?
I think the party needs to consider again its whole selection process. I don't think people in the party were on Snapchat looking for Jake Bezant and his perversions, frankly.
Judith Collins says party discussions about changing selection processes are expected to happen at its conference next month.
The whole selection process needs to be looked at, and I think too is that we shouldn't just rely on people putting down or referees that people give us when we're looking at candidates. We should look further, and people never give you the referees that they don't want you to ring.
RNZ has contacted Jake Bezant to offer him a right of reply to Ms Collins' comments, but we are yet to receive a response. Government ministers say they're stunned and saddened by the state of Māori boarding schools in Aotearoa. They're putting their money where their mouth is, investing $20 million into the 4 remaining Māori boarding schools over the Motu. Today they visited Hukarere's Girls' College near Napier to learn what needs to be improved. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen was there.
Hukarere is a haikura, or high school, with Waru Te Mā Whitu students. Rima Te Mā Roa students board at the hostel. Ikuroa Rāwhiti MP Meka Whaitere has connections to the school. Although she didn't attend, 6 generations of wahine in her whānau have.
To be honest, I'm quite saddened by the state of the hostels, particularly the coldness in where the young women are expected to sleep, the state of the abolition blocks, stunned by the state of the kitchen. It was like stepping back into something in the 50s.
She thinks improvements are needed.
I can see where the proprietors have tried to patch up and make amends where you can, but overall the impression you come away having gone through the hostels is we could do better.
Associate Minister of Education Calvin Davis found the condition of the akomanga, or classrooms, sad. But he says the last thing the government wants is to close them.
These Māori boarding schools have played an important role in growing Māori leaders, and that's what this pūtea is for.
and their legacy must continue.
They've been around since you've seen since the mid-1800s, and we want them to. This kura is going to celebrate its 150th anniversary in 4 years' time. We want it to be here for another 150 years at least after that.
Year 13 student Makari Cunningham is grateful for what the school has, but wants improvement.
I think within the classrooms there could be a lot of more creative things in there, and some of the chairs in our classrooms are a bit pukaroo.
The tumuaki, or principal, Shona West, says change is needed.
You know, I don't know many schools that have got the entire school as prefabs. I don't know of any school in Hawke's Bay that's got that, and we have. They're relocated rooms, they're not built on the site, which begs the question about, you know, how long do we have to be in this kind of setup.
The school has to use its gym as its chapel, and it doesn't work.
It's quite sad. You know, in 1 minute we're praising the Lord and using that for chapel service, and on the other hand, they're playing basketball in there, badminton, volleyball, doing kapahaka. Yeah. You know, but that's what we're forced to do.
Hukarere is one of the 4 remaining Māori boarding schools in the country. 2 more are also in Te Mato a Maui, that's Hawke's Bay. They are St Joseph's in Ngahurere and Te Ote College in Pukeho. The other is Hato Paora and Fielding in the Manawatu. Its tumuaki, Dr Nathan Matthews, says the boarding areas need the cash.
For us, I think our greatest area of need is in our hostel, our dormitories, the living areas. So those are sort of, you know, it takes a lot of money to maintain the dormitories. So they would be our number one priority in terms of where we would look to spend the money.
The kura don't know what share of the $20 million they'll get at this stage. They'll work through that on a needs-by-needs basis with Te Puni Kōkiri, the Ministry of Māori Development.
Farmers flocked to a farm in Masterton to hear from scientists studying a sheep breed that sheds its own wool. This comes as depressed strong wool prices have left farmers feeling fleeced. Here's our rural reporter Maya Burry.
The vast majority of New Zealand's 26 million sheep are well acquainted with the shearing sheds, but the strong wool industry is facing difficult times. Massey University animal science professor Steve Morris says wool was once a large part of the farm income, but now it's an expense.
Sure, we might be able to increase it, but it's going to take a big effort, and the price at the moment is $2, $2.50 a kilo. We think to break even, you've got to have a wool price of $4.50. We're a long way off that, and shearing costs are going up.
With the ongoing poor returns, some farmers are considering getting out of the wool business and shifting to Wiltshire sheep, which shed their fleece. But with very few Wiltshires in the country, for many it's not as simple as out with the old and in with the new. Steve Morris says this has prompted it to run an on-farm study where it's converting a mob of Romney sheep to 100% Wiltshire through a multi-year cross-breeding program. He says this will give farmers a better understanding of the benefits and costs of shifting to a no-wool flock.
What some farmers come to us and say is, what are the production losses in terms of number of lambs, in terms of live weight gain, in terms of carcass weight, as we go through the grading up process from the first cross to the second cross to the third cross and the fourth cross. Well, we hope to be able to quantify all of those production changes.
Bringing them in so we can have a bit of a look at them in the yards. Behind trim! Behind trim!
The study's being done at Massey University's Riverside Farm near Masterton. Farm manager Digby Lowe says coming from a traditional hill country farming background, shedding sheep is something new for him.
I've sort of been brought up with the wool industry and it seems this is quite different. And so it's kind of interesting, but I found them pretty good. A little bit touchy to handle to start with as lambs. They're quite intelligent though. Once they've been worked a bit with the heading dogs, they seem to handle pretty good. One thing about the rams is, they were shedding earlier on. There was wool everywhere, and I did make the mistake of thinking I'll just get them in and shed that little bit to tidy them up because it looked a bit scruffy, but they're big buggers and it was an ideal.
So if you look at the yellow line, North Island Hill Country, back in 89-90,
a field day was held on Riverside Farm earlier this week, where results from the first year of the research were shared. About 70 people attended, including plenty of curious farmers. A farmer in the district, Robin Murray, has just started converting about half of his flock and says it was a big decision to make.
We've obviously been producing wool for a long time. The change is driven by lack of return for wool, the amount of labour required to generate that no return, and the fact that I'm not getting any younger as well. We're hoping that we'll be able to make a change which will improve our animal management and animal welfare without having to put all the work in that's associated with conventional full-wooled sheep.
The Morrison family have been breeding and farming Wiltshire sheep since the 1980s. Richard Morrison says it's an exciting time for the breed.
Whole network of research going on with Wiltshires and looking at the shedding gene and how to get into Wiltshire flock and things like that. So yeah, I think it's really exciting to actually be really objective about how to go about it.
And Massey University's Wiltshire sheep study has several years to go yet, with the aim of shedding more light on the switch to a no-wool flock.
The Hurricanes Super Rugby team have swapped the stadium for the lecture theatre, embarking on a quest to learn Nganganga Samoa. They've been undertaking a language and culture program at Victoria University. One of the players shared his special story with RNZ Pacific reporter Marina Whangaiava Mala.
Hurricanes' first 5/8 Auburn letter comes from a melting pot of culture. Beginning his career for the Samoa under-20s, switching allegiance to the New Zealand side with the Blues, then the Chiefs, and now donning the Canes jersey. But through it all, he's been proud to represent his Tongan, Māori, Fijian and Samoan lineage. He and 14 of his teammates are Samoan, many of them New Zealand-born with different levels of fluency. But they've all signed up for the 10-week course at their Herenga Waka, Victoria University. Mr Ledger says they've been organised into 3 groups of different language levels to encourage mentorship amongst the players.
It was actually quite cool to see a few of the boys speak fluent and speak Samoan in front of us. And likewise, when we were trying to learn, it was cool to just learn off those boys and be uncomfortable in those spaces, but know that when you're uncomfortable, you're growing.
Samoan language lecturer Leao Salilo Sadat Moeava facilitated the program, helped along by his first-year students. He set up a WhatsApp chat for the players to practice phrases and conversation starters. Leao Salilo says the diaspora, separated from home, have a hunger to learn.
The purpose of the program was connect and reconnect, the boys to their cultural and ethnic identities.
Hurricanes Professional Development Manager Arden David Perot says the course helped celebrate the boys' identity. The power of culture, he says, can take the team to new heights. He recalls a recent retreat on Indigenous knowledge, where the more quiet players, the shy ones, performed in the front line of a Siva Samoa, a side of them not quite seen on the field by supporters and even coaching staff.
Every day they go into an environment where it doesn't reflect them. And so the people they deal with daily, you could see the confidence in them. And so while Samoan was the outcome, I think an identity and being strong and being proud of being Samoan in the rugby context is important, and so that they don't have to leave their culture at the door.
That's pretty much all we've got time for this evening. Do have a wonderful, great long weekend. Our news team will keep you up to date. Checkpoint back on Tuesday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Transport Minister says a clean car incentive is coming soon. A fee bait would make electric cars cheaper to run than petrol vehicles. Ashburton's mayor is urging motorists to go slow after a fatal crash killed 4 in the flood-hit region. Victoria authorities have detected the highly infectious Delta or Indian COVID-19 virus variant for the first time in the latest outbreak. 22 families of Pike River victims have filed an urgent legal challenge against the plan to permanently seal the mine. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Someone have continued with their daily lives. They've kind of left the